The thoughts of Lindsay Allen. Now, it's not all that long ago that political life in Northern Ireland was producing iconic images of old enemies sitting down together for the first time. But now when we see our politicians in photographs, they often seem to be standing in groups, aimlessly pointing at things. Sure, the business of government needs to be seen to be done, but do they really need to spend quite so much time in front of the camera? Julia Paul investigates.
These days, increasingly, we're not told about the event, or we're told very little about it. The photograph is supplied afterwards.
A lot of the stuff that comes in, they're not bad pictures. It's just that they're taken with a different sort of plan in mind.
If you're not seen doing whatever it is you're doing, you might as well be doing nothing at all.
I think the real question here is how much control does the government have and how much does it want to have?
These days, there's no shortage of photographs of our politicians out and about in the community, working hard. So much so, the photographs have even sparked their own Facebook page, with contributors attaching captions. But with a subject as serious as politics, is there too much emphasis on photo opportunities and not enough on answering questions? At the recent announcement of the development plan for the controversial GARBUTT site in North Belfast, photographers were invited, but not the broadcast media. Although later the BBC's political editor Mark Devonport was able to carry out interviews.
On the one hand, the press officers are trying to control the story. On the other hand, the media are trying to get as much information as they can. I think that's healthy. I think the problem comes when there's an imbalance there, when there are too many press officers and there aren't enough journalists. And I think that increasingly that's becoming the case.
It's an issue that the TUV MLA Jim Allister has raised, revealing that 161 people work in the information offices at Stormont, although government says only around 80 of them are press officers. In January of this year, the executive also signed a £400,000 photography contract with 6 companies to have pictures taken of ministers. That means it's your money paying for many of these shots. These are supplied to the media and uploaded to the executive website.
Today, because photographers are often commissioned by third parties, what they're trying to do is to make that third party look good, as opposed to...
The PR consultant and former newspaper editor Nick GARBUTT says there have been major changes in the industry.
What you do lose is the kind of artistry of brilliant images like that one of Paisley, for instance, that Brandon Murphy took. Wonderful image, couldn't possibly be anybody else. And there's another really interesting one here, which is one of my favourite ones of Brandon's, is Martin McGuinness taking off from the Sinn Féin office on the Falls Road to go to his office in Stormont for the first time, and really brilliantly conceived, taken against the backdrop of that Bobby Sands mural.
But, he says, while many newspapers no longer have their own photography departments, ministers still need to get their messages out.
From a government perspective, it's very, very important to be putting out images which is showing ministers doing things, whatever that happens to be. With the exception of the Irish News, there isn't really the resource in terms of photographers any longer with the newspapers. So unless you actually provide a photograph for your event, then your event probably isn't going to be covered. It's certainly not going to be photographed.
Press officers say to me, the newsletter doesn't have a staff photographer anymore, so we supply them with the photographs of issues that we want covered.
There's a certain element of truth to that, but I think the case is that if the newsletter wants any photograph taken, we pay to get it taken. I think the real question here is how much control does the government have and how much does it want to have, and I think the government would love to be able to decide exactly what photographs go into the newspapers, how their ministers appear, what they're looking at, and that is the real issue. It's not an attempt to help out the press. I think this is very much about presenting a certain image of the executive.
Well, at the Irish News, they do still employ their own photographers.
The old-fashioned way of doing it would have been to simply stage your event and invite up the press, particularly the photographers. Now, photographers will be looking for different angles, literally. They'll be looking for something a little unexpected, a little quirky. These days, increasingly, we're not told about the event, or we're told very little about it. The photograph is supplied afterwards of smiling ministers with their chosen guests, and you know, I suppose it's all in a day's work, but it's hardly healthy.
I think it's fair enough to say that we would never be able to cover all the events that they cover. I mean, the amount of coverage that they put in day upon day is amazing. Certainly we wouldn't do that, but there's certain occasions, there's certain things that do make pictures, and the different newspapers, ourselves included, would like the chance to do that themselves. And I think if we done that ourselves, they would have a much higher chance of being used in the paper.
There's no doubt there's tension between what government would like to see covered in the media and what the media thinks is a story. But surely we need to hear our politicians as well as see them. Do you think you are able to get access to ask the questions?
I think we'd like more access than we're getting. If it's not offered, well, too bad. We'll turn our attentions elsewhere. We'll come up with our own stories, which we do very regularly, and they make their own impact. And if that's without the sort of cooperation of the authorities, well, so be it. We'll get on with it. We'll set our own agenda. But I think it would be good to have just a little bit more of an understanding with the senior figures, just a little bit more in the way of interaction, a few more briefings.
According to the Office of the First and Deputy First Minister, providing photographs is a key element of the Executive's communication strategy and provides a visible record of how ministers are working. A spokesman said the current photography contract was tendered for and will be reviewed in a year's time. And he added that ministers only posed for photographs when they had time.